Let me have you say and spell your first and last name.
Dennis Clary, Dennisclary.
All right, your official title, Dennis.
I'm a marketing and sales representative for the Boeing Company.
Okay. In that job, kind of break it down. What does that job entail? What do you do?
Well, so the organization that I work with within the Boeing Company is called the Global Transport and Executive Systems Group, and we specialize in the maintenance, modification, and upgrades primarily of commercial derivative aircraft. Our niche or core customer is actually the executive fleet of aircraft for the United States government. So pretty weighty customer, you might think. My role is really threefold. First and foremost, a customer interface and liaison. So I have somewhat of a heavily traveling stint as a part of my routine. But then also to lead sales campaigns and develop the proposals that we ultimately submit back to the government.
What type of background do you need to go into that?
That's a tricky question, because I guess I can tell you that my background is varied. I have an undergraduate degree in mechanical engineering, and that was really my path to the Boeing Company and how I started my career. Found out I wasn't that great of an engineer within a couple years and aspired to different things. I did some corporate rotations with the company, multiple locations: Seattle, Chicago, Florida, California. That was in an audit function and allowed me to really see the breadth of our company. After that, some people laugh at me for this, but I really wanted to return to Wichita for a variety of reasons, and I came back as a chief of staff to our executive GM. And so it's not necessarily one path, I guess, that got me to where I am now, but I think this is certainly it's a much better fit for me than the engineering function was.
What's the toughest part of your job right now? If you're on the sales end and then marketing, especially to the government, how difficult is that? The government must be a unique customer.
That's a great question. Very unique environment, if you will. Heavily bureaucratic, if you might imagine. In stark contrast to the commercial side, it often takes years to manifest a substantial sale or order, if you will. There's not just one direct customer, but a myriad of customer stakeholders, all of which have some level of influence or voice. So you have to be very strategic in who you see, when you see, the messages that you're carrying. With that said, the defense environment right now is somewhat bleak, right? If you're manufacturing for defense. In the past 2 years, we've already seen $400 billion in savings from a former Secretary Gates initiative, and now we've heard of another call from Obama back in April for yet another $400 billion, up to $1 trillion possibly, in defense and overall budget cuts over the span of the next 10 years. So that is the primary environmental force that's pushing down upon our industry right now, which means we really have to be more affordable than ever. And forgive the trite phrase, but really, honestly, think out of the box compared to where we've been.
If you had a message for President Obama right now, what would it be, considering all the cuts and what the industry is facing?
I'm certainly biased, right? And I like to think there's a direct correlation to defense spending and maintaining national security. With that said, I understand during these times, tough times call for tough choices, and everybody has to burden their share. And I think the Boeing Company is certainly willing to do that and make the changes necessary to really help our government customer and the nation go forward. At the corporate level, we've already implemented a number of significant cost-cutting initiatives in terms of whether it's just organization restructuring, flattening or reducing our executive and management infrastructure, to actually relocating key programs to make them more affordable for our government customer.
Did you have anything to do with the tanker program, or is that on the other side?
I personally did not. We certainly have a play in that here locally in our Boeing operations, but that's a different business unit than what I work in.
We'll get to some of our 9/11 questions here. We were curious, looking at the anniversary of the attacks coming up. Somewhere it was reported that Wichita was the second city, I think, that had the most impact economic impact from the terrorist attacks, just because of the huge aviation force that we have here.
You bet.
What's your perspective, working in aviation, just looking at the attacks and what happened in Wichita locally? Well,
that certainly makes sense. I mean, Wichita is, I think, one of 5 major aviation installations in the world, so the impact is certainly understandable. I have somewhat of a personal testimonial. I was a recent new hire to the Boeing company at the time, very green, just learning how to design parts. When 9/11 had happened, I think I'd been working for the company maybe 3 or 4 months. And not shortly thereafter received my layoff notice because of the direct implications on commercial aviation market at the time, a stark downturn. So I was out of work. After only being at work for about 7 months, I was out of work for about half a year.
And then they called you back?
Yes, very fortunate. I think somebody was certainly looking down on me, and I had a former supervisor that retained his position and threw my name back in the hat, if you will. So yeah, it was interesting. You might paint a picture. I was a guy, had a great job coming out of college, and then found myself unemployed, drawing unemployment wages. I picked up a part-time job in Old Town at a nightclub. Lost my girlfriend at the time. I often joke that all I needed was for my dog to die, and you could have written a country song about my experience.
Oh man, was there any sort of resentment that here's a company that has let me go? Was there any decision making on your end on whether to go back?
So the honest answer is yes, and that was really born, if I'm frank, out of immaturity at the time. This was about a decade ago, and there's a part of me that felt a little jaded, but really didn't probably grasp or understand the larger picture at the time, and why letting people like myself go was really a necessity in order to be competitive in the future. Certainly after understanding that, it helped. And I'll be honest, looking back at the time, I didn't really have a number of options on the table. I was very surprised and grateful to have received the call. And of all places, it was on the Air Force One program. And so you can imagine the phone conversation. Dennis, would you like to come back to Boeing and work on the President's aircraft? Somewhat of a no-brainer. Yeah.
Are there any details that you can tell us about?
Unfortunately, I'm not. There's not. Some people would say that I probably shouldn't have even commented on it as a project that we work on here locally, but I think most Wichitans have probably seen the aircraft in the sky.
So not even one little detail, something interesting that you could share with us? People, I think, are fascinated when they see the plane up and knowing that all the work is done here locally.
Absolutely. Not much I can share. I've been on it once, again, about a decade ago. It was pretty much stripped at the time of all of its inner furnishings, and I was specifically working on a circuit breaker panel at the time. So not very exciting in terms of the equipment, but still, what a great opportunity to say you've been on board the aircraft. And we take a lot of pride in that, obviously, here.
That's great. Anything else, Dennis, you want to add? Or?
No, I think that's it. I don't think so. We talked about the environmental forces coming down, what we're doing from a Boeing perspective. I mean, really, it's a time, we refer to it as revolutionary change, where we believe that amidst this sort of chaos, opportunities can be born. And if we are the first to step out, we can sort of be that first mover and hopefully sustain that competitive advantage in the future.